Discipline is not what you think it is. In fact, the harder you try to control yourself, the weaker you become. I've watched empires fall because their generals confused rigidity with strength, punishment with preparation. The warrior who forces himself to wake at dawn through sheer willpower is already losing the war within. True discipline, it whispers, it bends, it never announces itself. Today, I'm going to show you why everything you've been told about self-control is preparing you for collapse, not victory, and what the ancient battlefields taught me about the kind of strength that actually lasts. You know, I spent 3 decades of my life studying warfare, not because I love violence, but because war strips away all the lies we tell ourselves. On the battlefield, there's no room for pretending, no space for the stories we use to make ourselves feel better. When lives are at stake, you see human nature in its purest, most honest form. And what I learned there, in the mud and blood and exhaustion, wasn't just about winning battles. It was about something much deeper. It was about how human beings actually work, what makes us strong, and what breaks us apart from the inside. And here's what I need you to understand right now, before we go any further. You've been lied to about discipline. I don't say that lightly. I don't say it to be dramatic or to get your attention, though I hope I have it. I say it because I've seen what those lies do to people. I've watched soldiers destroy themselves trying to live up to an impossible standard. I've watched leaders burn out, relationships crumble, potential wasted, all because someone, somewhere along the line, convinced them that discipline meant war against themselves. You've been told that discipline is about force, about grinding harder, resisting more, becoming some kind of machine that can override your humanity. You've been told to wake up at 5 in the morning, even when your body is screaming for rest. You've been told to push through pain, ignore your needs, deny yourself anything that feels good. You've been told that if you're not suffering, you're not disciplined. That comfort is the enemy. That your natural human desires are weaknesses to be conquered. And because of that lie, you're exhausted. You're inconsistent. You start strong and collapse within weeks. You beat yourself up every time you fail. You're secretly convinced that something's broken inside you, that everyone else has some kind of strength you just don't possess. You look at people who seem to have their lives together, and you think there's some secret you're missing, some willpower gene you weren't born with. I'm here to tell you something that might sound strange coming from someone known for military strategy and discipline. You're not weak. You're not broken. You don't lack willpower. You're just using the wrong map. You're fighting the wrong battle. And that's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to learn the truth now that you're hearing it. See, here's what nobody tells you about discipline. The warriors who lasted, the leaders who built legacies that outlived them by centuries, the people who actually changed the course of history, they didn't achieve it through willpower. They achieved it through strategy. And strategy is a completely different animal than force. Let me tell you about 2 generals I knew. I want you to really picture this, because it's going to show you everything you need to understand about what discipline actually is. The first general ran his camp like you'd expect a military camp to be run. Every morning, before the sun even thought about rising, his soldiers were yanked from sleep by the sound of drums. Loud, violent, startling drums. If you weren't on your feet in seconds, you were punished. Morning exercises were brutal, not challenging, not building strength, brutal, designed to break you, to remind you that your body was not your own, that comfort was weakness, that any moment of rest was a moment of failure. His camp was immaculate, every tent in perfect alignment, every weapon polished to a mirror shine, every soldier moving with mechanical precision. Meals were eaten in silence. Rest was minimal, viewed with suspicion. Any soldier who showed signs of fatigue was seen as lacking commitment. Any mistake, no matter how small, was met with public shame. The message was clear and constant. You are not enough. You must push harder. Your humanity is your enemy. And everyone feared this general. His soldiers obeyed without question. When he gave an order, it was executed instantly, perfectly. To an outsider, his army looked like the most disciplined fighting force you'd ever seen. The second general, his camp was different, so different that at first glance, it almost seemed undisciplined. His soldiers woke with the sun, naturally, their bodies allowed to find their own rhythm. There was no violent awakening, no punishment for needing rest. Morning routines existed, yes, but they were simple, sustainable, built around the natural energy of the human body rather than against it. Meals were shared, communal affairs. Soldiers talked, laughed even. Rest was protected, treated like the strategic resource it actually is. When a soldier was exhausted, truly exhausted, he was allowed to recover. Not because this general was soft, but because he understood that a rested soldier is a functioning soldier, and an exhausted soldier is a liability waiting to happen. Training was rigorous. Don't misunderstand me. His soldiers worked hard, but the work was intelligent. It built strength rather than breaking spirit. It created capability rather than compliance. And mistakes, when they happened, were treated as information. What went wrong? What can we learn? How do we adapt? Not shame, not punishment. Learning. Now, here's the question that matters. Which army do you think won when they finally met in battle? If you've been taught what most people are taught about discipline, you might guess the first general's army. The one with perfect order, immediate obedience, soldiers who'd been hardened through suffering. That's what we're told to admire, right? That's what strength is supposed to look like. But you'd be wrong. The first general's army was perfect right up until the first real crisis. And then they froze. See, they'd been trained to follow orders, not to think. They'd been trained to obey, not to adapt. When their general fell early in the battle, struck by an arrow he didn't see coming, his army shattered within hours. Because everything they knew how to do was built on external control. They'd never developed internal direction. They waited for orders that would never come. The second general's army? When their general fell, they kept fighting. Not out of fear. Not because they'd been beaten into compliance. They kept fighting because discipline had become their nature, not their cage. They knew the strategy, the purpose, the reason behind each movement. They'd been trained to align with a goal, not to obey a tyrant, and that made them unbreakable. One army was disciplined through force. The other was disciplined through alignment. One treated humans as machines to be programmed. The other treated humans as intelligent beings to be guided. And in the moment of truth, in the chaos and confusion and terror of real battle, only one of those approaches survived. Your life is that battlefield. Every single day, you're one of these generals to yourself. And most of you, because of what you've been taught, you're being the first general to yourself. You're waking yourself up with violence, metaphorically speaking. You're punishing yourself for being human. You're creating systems built on shame and force, and the constant message that you're not enough. You need to push harder. Your natural desires are the enemy. And then you wonder why it doesn't work. You wonder why you can't maintain it. But you're not struggling because you're weak. You're struggling because you're trying to use force where you need strategy. Let me share another story with you. There's a technique blacksmiths use when they're forging a truly great blade. Not just any sword, but the kind of blade that becomes legendary. The kind that gets passed down through generations. That survives battles that would shatter lesser weapons. You know what makes those blades special? It's not hardness. In fact, if you make a blade too hard, too rigid, it becomes brittle. It looks strong. It feels strong when you hold it. But the first time it hits something with real resistance, that blade shatters. The truly great blades, the ones that last, they're made through a process of heating and cooling in cycles. You heat the metal, you hammer it, you shape it, and then you cool it. But you don't just do that once. You do it over and over, creating layers. And here's the magic. You introduce flexibility between those layers of strength. You create a structure where the blade can bend without breaking. Those blades are soft in the right places. That sounds wrong, doesn't it? A sword should be hard, should be strong, should be unyielding. But the blacksmith knows better. The blacksmith knows that true strength includes flexibility. That durability requires the ability to bend. Your discipline is exactly the same. If you make yourself too rigid, too hard, too perfect, you will shatter the first time life applies real pressure. And life will apply real pressure, I promise you that. A missed day, an unexpected crisis, a moment of very human weakness. And suddenly, because you've built your discipline on rigidity, the whole system collapses. I see this all the time. Someone decides they're going to be disciplined. They create this elaborate system. They're going to wake up at 5 a.m. every day, no exceptions. They're going to work out for an hour, no matter what. They're going to eat perfectly, track every calorie, never deviate from the plan. And for a week, maybe 2 weeks, if they're really determined, it works. They feel amazing. They feel like they've finally figured it out. And then one morning, they sleep through their alarm. Or they get sick. Or life throws something unexpected at them, and suddenly the perfect system has a crack in it. And because the whole thing was built on perfection, built on rigid control, that one crack becomes a catastrophic failure. They miss one workout, and suddenly they've failed. The whole elaborate system collapses, and they're back to square one, convinced once again that they're just not disciplined enough. But that's not what happened. What happened is they built a brittle blade. They made themselves too hard, and the first real impact shattered them. If you build your discipline like that legendary sword, though, everything changes. If you weave rest into effort, if you build flexibility into structure, if you layer self-compassion with self-challenge, you become unbreakable. Not because you're perfect, not because you never bend, but because you can bend without breaking. So that's the first massive reframe I need you to understand. Discipline is not about force. It's not about being harder, more rigid, more machine-like. It's about intelligent design. It's about strategy. It's about building something that lasts, rather than something that looks impressive for 2 weeks and then collapses. Now, let me get really practical with you about what this actually means in your daily life. Here's what I learned commanding armies. The general, who depends on his soldiers' courage, is a fool. Courage is unreliable. It comes and goes. Some days, your soldiers wake up feeling brave. Other days, they wake up scared and exhausted. If your entire battle strategy depends on them feeling brave, you've already lost. You know what doesn't fail? Terrain, geography, the physical reality of the battlefield. If you position your army on high ground, suddenly bravery isn't required. Gravity does half the work for you. Your position is easier to defend. The enemy has to exhaust themselves just reaching you. You haven't made your soldiers braver. You've made bravery less necessary. Your life is the exact same battlefield. If you're relying on willpower to maintain your discipline, you've already lost. Willpower is courage. It's unreliable. It comes and goes. Some days you wake up motivated. Other days you wake up exhausted and everything feels impossible. If your entire system depends on you feeling motivated, you're setting yourself up for collapse. Let me give you a concrete example. Let's say you want to eat healthier. Most people approach this through willpower. They say, I'm going to resist junk food. I'm going to be strong. And for a few days, when motivation is high, it works. They resist the cookies. They turn down the fast food. They feel strong, disciplined, in control. But then comes the hard day, the stressful day, the day when they're exhausted and overwhelmed and their willpower tank is empty. And suddenly those cookies aren't so easy to resist anymore. And they eat the cookies and they feel like they've failed. But that's not what happened at all. What happened is they tried to use willpower where they needed strategy. Now watch what happens when you apply actual strategic thinking. You want to eat healthier. Instead of relying on willpower to resist junk food, you remove the junk food from your house. You just don't buy it. It's not there. Now, on that hard day, that exhausted day, when your willpower is empty, you're not resisting anything. You're just eating what's available. And what's available is healthy food. Because that's all you have. You prep meals on Sunday. You spend 2 hours one day making your future self's life easier. Now during the week, when you're tired and hungry, you're not trying to summon the willpower to cook. You're just reheating something you already made. The healthy choice is now easier than the unhealthy choice. Do you see the difference? In one approach, you're fighting a battle every single day. In the other approach, you're not fighting at all. You set up the battlefield once, and then the rest of the week, you're just living in the environment you created. This is what I mean when I say discipline is about environment, not willpower. The masters don't try to change themselves. They change their environment. They design their surroundings so that discipline is easy, so that the right choice is the obvious choice. Let me tell you about another paradox. Every new commander makes the same mistake. They try to control everything. Every soldier, every movement, every possible outcome. And they exhaust themselves into defeat. The masters learn to let go. Not of purpose, never of purpose, but of the illusion of total control. You cannot control whether you feel like working out today. That's just true. Some days you'll wake up energized. Other days you'll wake up tired. Your feelings are not under your direct control. If you try to control your feelings, you're trying to control the wind. It's impossible. It's exhausting. But you can control putting on your shoes. That's an action. That's something you decide and then do. You can control walking to your gym bag. You can control stepping outside. Those are things within your control. True discipline is identifying the 1 or 2 actions you can actually control and releasing everything else. Most people fail at discipline because they're trying to control their feelings, their motivation, their entire internal weather system. But feeling is not required. Action is what matters. And action is actually within your control. Let me make this even more concrete. You want to write a book. Most days, you don't feel inspired. So you wait. You wait for inspiration to strike. You wait to feel ready. And while you're waiting, nothing gets created. But what if you stopped trying to control inspiration? What if you just controlled the action of sitting at your desk? Not writing brilliantly, just sitting at your desk for 30 minutes. That's something you can control. And once you're sitting there, once you've taken the action, inspiration often follows. The feeling comes after the action, not before it. So stop trying to control whether you feel like it. Just identify the smallest action you can control and do that. That's all discipline is, not feeling like it and doing it anyway. Now let me tell you about something that might sound strange. Discipline feeds on identity, not goals. I've seen soldiers fight in two very different ways. Some soldiers fight for gold, for payment. They're mercenaries in spirit. They fight because that's the transaction. And those soldiers fight fine when things are going well. But the moment things get hard, they're gone. They desert, they surrender, they run. Because the whole thing was transactional. Other soldiers fight differently. They're defending their homeland, their families. It's not about what they'll gain. It's about who they are. They're not fighting for gold. They're fighting because they're protectors. And those soldiers don't quit when things get hard. They fight harder. Because it's not a transaction. It's an expression of who they are. Your discipline is exactly the same. If you're trying to be disciplined because you think you should, because someone told you to, because you want to achieve some external goal, that's mercenary energy. That's transactional discipline, and it will abandon you the moment the payoff doesn't seem worth the effort. But if your discipline flows from identity, everything changes. Instead of, I want to lose 20 pounds, it becomes, I'm someone who takes care of my body. Instead of, I want to write a book, it's, I'm a writer. Instead of, I want to save money, it's, I'm someone who lives intentionally. When discipline is tied to identity, it's no longer about achieving something external. It's about expressing who you are. Writers write. That's what they do. Not because they're chasing a bestseller. Not because they feel inspired every day. But because writing is how they express their identity in the world. When discipline becomes identity, it stops being effort. It becomes expression. Here's how you start making this shift. Stop asking, what should I do? Start asking, who am I becoming? Not should I work out today, but am I someone who takes care of their health? Not should I write today, but am I someone who creates? When you start living from identity, you stop negotiating with yourself. Because you don't negotiate with who you are. People who take care of their health don't have a daily debate about whether to exercise. They exercise because that's what people who take care of their health do. This is how discipline stops being a battle and starts being a way of life. Now, I need to tell you something that might make you uncomfortable. Rest is a weapon. I'm serious. It's not a reward you earn. It's not something you do when everything else is done. Rest is a strategic tool that determines whether you succeed or fail in the long term. I've seen more armies destroyed by exhaustion than by enemy swords. The general who doesn't let his soldiers sleep, who pushes them past effectiveness, loses every time. You are your own army. And if you're not resting, if you're grinding yourself into dust, you're not disciplined. You're self-destructive. Real discipline includes rest. The undisciplined person collapses and calls it rest. They push until their body cannot continue, and then they crash. The disciplined person rests before collapse. They schedule recovery. They protect sleep like it's sacred. They take breaks without guilt. Think about physical training. When do your muscles actually grow? Not during the workout. During the workout, you're breaking them down. The growth happens during rest. When you sleep, when you recover, that's when your body repairs and builds back stronger. Your discipline works the same way. You don't get stronger by grinding 24/7. You get stronger by working intensely and then recovering completely. The rest is not separate from the growth. It's where the growth happens. So what does strategic rest look like? First, protect your sleep. Treat it like the most important appointment of your day. Second, stop before you're completely empty. Work hard, yes, but stop at 80%. Leave something in the tank. Stop while you still have energy left. Third, take breaks without guilt. Real rest means releasing the guilt. Trust that this recovery time is productive, even though it doesn't feel like progress. If you're burning out, if you're exhausted all the time, that's not a sign you lack discipline. It's a sign you're being disciplined about the wrong things. You're disciplined about pushing, but not about recovering. Now, let's talk about how you actually build this. For the next week, fight only one battle per day, not 10. One. Pick the single most important disciplined action, the one that, if you did it consistently, would change everything. Maybe it's writing for 15 minutes. Maybe it's going to bed by 10 p.m. Maybe it's responding instead of reacting. That's your battle. Everything else is negotiable. Every time you win your one battle, you're proving something to yourself. You're proving that you keep your word. And that self-trust compounds faster than any habit. Second practice. Design your terrain. Spend 30 minutes this week rearranging your environment. Put your running shoes by your bed. Delete the apps that steal your attention. Prep tomorrow's decisions tonight. Create friction for bad habits and remove friction for good ones. Third practice. The treaty ritual. Every Sunday, draft a treaty with yourself. Ask, what do I need this week? What will I protect? What will I release? Write it down. Sign it. This is you treating yourself like an ally, not an enemy. Fourth practice, the victory log. Every night, write down one thing you did that aligned with who you're becoming, not what you failed at. One thing you did. This rewires your brain from shame to recognition. So let's come back to where we started. Discipline is not about controlling yourself. It's not about becoming harder, colder, more machine than human. It's about building a life where your energy flows toward your purpose instead of constantly fighting against your nature. It's about designing environments that make the right choice easy. It's about resting strategically. It's about becoming someone whose actions match their identity. The general who screams at his army loses. The general who aligns his army with terrain, purpose, and their own nature. Unstoppable. You are both the general and the army. Stop declaring war on yourself. Start drafting the treaty. Here's your mantra. I am not broken. I am not weak. I've simply been using force where I need strategy. My discipline doesn't come from suffering. It comes from alignment. And every day, I become a little more whole. If this resonated with you, leave a comment and tell me which lesson hit hardest. I read them. Your insights matter. And if you want more of this, Ancient wisdom made practical. Philosophy made real. Subscribe. Not because I need you to, but because you deserve to remember who you actually are beneath all the noise. You're not here to become someone else. You're here to become the most truthful version of yourself. And that journey, that's where discipline actually lives. I'll see you in the next one.